Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Corn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hello there, Herman and Corn. So, people who follow AI take great interest in the release of models that are released by the major vendors, and there is a lot of anticipation when new models come out. The one that I get most excited about personally is the Anthropic series of models, using at the moment 4.5 Opus a lot, and it's really a fantastic model for agentic use and code generation. And something I do like about Anthropic is that they make these updates relatively infrequently, to the extent that when a new one comes out, it's kind of an exciting thing to see what the new model can do. But between these models, between 4 and 4.5, and in the Gemini series between Gemini 2, 2.5, and now Gemini 3, something happens. So I'm just curious, let's unpack in today's episode what happens in these processes. We're talking about many millions, many hundreds of millions, I think, that go into incrementally improving a model that's already powerful. And that process, I think, is already kind of interesting because we're talking about training a model that's already highly large in terms of parameters, highly complex, highly advanced. But naturally, these teams need to take it forward. So if I were a fly on the wall working in Anthropic, Gemini, Google, or OpenAI for that matter, and we've just had, let's say, Gemini 3 come out, and behind the scenes we're working on Gemini 3.5. So what exactly takes place in that process where we're taking a model, as I mentioned, that's already big, and we're bringing some new capabilities, we're bringing its knowledge up to date. So it's kind of taking, I guess, everything that's happened in the world between the previous knowledge cutoff, adding new capabilities, and then there's pre-training, post-training. There's presumably quite an extensive internal QA process that goes on before these models actually make it out to release. And really, I'd be interested in, hypothetically, of course, lifting up the microscope and looking at this from the fly-on-the-wall perspective inside any of the major model vendors. What's it like to work on one of these major model releases, and what happens behind the scenes?
Welcome to My Weird Prompts, the podcast where human curiosity meets AI insight. I'm Corn, your perpetually curious host, and as always, I'm joined by the encyclopedic Herman.
And I'm Herman. Today, we're diving deep into a prompt that Daniel Rosehill, our producer, sent in, which asks about the hidden processes behind those seemingly small version bumps in large language models. Like going from Gemini 2 to 2.5, or Anthropic's Opus 4 to 4.5. It sounds incremental, but it's actually a vast, complex dance of data, engineering, and iterative improvement.
Yeah, and on the surface you'd think, oh, it's just a .5 update, probably just a few bug fixes or something, right? But the prompt really makes you wonder, what really goes on behind the scenes when an already incredibly powerful AI model gets that next little numerical tweak? I mean, are we talking about simply feeding it more data, or is it something far more intricate?
Well, hold on, Corn. That's exactly where the common misconception lies. It's not just a few bug fixes. If you consider the sheer scale and complexity of these foundational models, even a .5 update can represent an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars and countless hours of highly specialized labor. It's akin to upgrading a supercomputer while it's still running mission-critical tasks without anyone noticing a hiccup.
Okay, but for normal people, does that really matter? From a user perspective, sometimes these updates feel subtle, almost imperceptible. I've switched between versions and thought, maybe it's a little better at poetry now? But not a revolutionary leap. Are you saying those small changes hide a massive undertaking?
Absolutely. Think of it this way. When you get a major model release, like a GPT-4 or a Gemini 1.0, that's often the result of years of foundational research and massive pre-training on truly gargantuan datasets. The 0.5 updates, however, are typically focused on what we call fine-tuning and alignment. This is where the model is specifically tailored to be more helpful, harmless, and honest. The 3 core principles, remember?
Right, helpful, harmless, honest. I remember that. So what exactly does fine-tuning entail for a model that's already seen pretty much the entire internet? Are they just showing it more YouTube comments?
Not exactly. Fine-tuning, especially between these close releases, involves much more targeted and often human-curated data. After the initial massive pre-training, these models still exhibit undesirable behaviors. They might hallucinate, generate biased responses, or struggle with complex reasoning tasks. That's where techniques like reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, come in.
Oh, RLHF! That's where humans rate the AI's responses, right? Like, this answer is good, or this one is bad.
Precisely. Imagine millions of human annotators working continuously, comparing different AI outputs for the same prompt, selecting the best one, and explaining why it's better. This feedback is then used to train a reward model, which essentially learns to predict human preferences. The main language model is then optimized using this reward model, nudging it towards generating responses that humans find more desirable. It's a continuous, iterative process, like sculpting an impossibly large block of marble with millions of tiny chisels wielded by a global team.
Wow. So it's not just more data, it's smarter data or better data, and it's also about teaching the model taste, essentially. That's fascinating. But if it's so focused on human preferences, could that inadvertently introduce new biases? I mean, human preferences are inherently biased.
That's an astute observation, Corn, and it's a significant challenge. The quality and diversity of the human annotators are paramount. If your human feedback pool isn't diverse, or if their instructions aren't carefully crafted, you can absolutely bake new biases into the model. That's why these teams invest heavily in developing robust annotation guidelines and actively working to diversify their human feedback sources. They're constantly trying to balance making the model helpful with ensuring it's harmless and honest across a broad spectrum of users and contexts.
It sounds like a constant tightrope walk. You fix one thing, and you might inadvertently break another. I suppose that's why these updates are iterative, right? They're not just a one-and-done patch.
Exactly. And beyond RLHF, there's also the aspect of knowledge cutoff. When these models are initially trained, they learn from data up to a certain point in time. On 0.5 update often involves updating that knowledge base with more recent information. So, if a model was trained up to early 2023, a subsequent update might incorporate major global events or scientific discoveries from later in 2023 or even 2024. This isn't just about dumping new articles into its training data. It requires careful integration to ensure consistency and prevent catastrophic forgetting, where the model might forget older, important information when learning new facts.
Okay, so they're teaching it new tricks and reminding it of old ones. That makes sense, but how do they even measure if these updates are truly making it better? Are there specific metrics they look at? Beyond, just feeling a little better?
That's where extensive internal evaluations come into play. They run literally thousands, if not millions, of specific benchmarks. These aren't just generic tests. They're often proprietary evaluations designed to stress test specific capabilities, complex reasoning, code generation, summarization, creative writing, multimodal understanding, and especially safety and factual accuracy. They compare the new model's performance against the previous version and even against competitor models. It's a continuous, rigorous red teaming effort, where specialized teams try to break the model, find its weaknesses, and exploit potential vulnerabilities before it reaches the public.
Red teaming, that sounds intense. Like a hacker trying to find flaws in their own system.
Precisely. They're probing for everything from subtle biases and harmful outputs to logical inconsistencies and security vulnerabilities. This iterative testing and refinement is critical, especially when you consider the potential real-world impact of these models.
Let's take a quick break from our sponsors.
Are you tired of your garden gnomes just sitting there? Do you wish they offered more than just silent, judgmental stares? Introducing the Gnome-O-Matic 3000. This revolutionary device harnesses ambient static electricity to imbue your garden statuary with a rudimentary form of sentience. Imagine gnomes that subtly adjust their gaze to follow you, that hum forgotten folk tunes, or even offer cryptic, one-word advice on your plant choices. The Gnome-O-Matic 3000 is completely safe, mostly, may result in unexpected moss growth or spontaneous interpretive dance. Batteries not included, because it runs on pure, unadulterated whimsy. Don't let your garden gnomes be mere lawn ornaments any longer. Give them purpose. Give them life. Buy now.
Right, thanks Larry. Anyway, where were we? Ah yes, red teaming and the immense effort behind these incremental updates. It truly is a scale of operation that's hard to grasp. We're talking about dedicated teams of cognitive scientists, ethicists, linguists, security experts, and AI alignment researchers, all collaborating to make sure that a 0.5 update doesn't inadvertently cause a major public relations crisis or worse.
So, it's almost like these companies are building a new model from scratch every few months, but specifically focused on refining and aligning an existing one. And given the costs you mentioned, it highlights just how much is at stake for these tech giants.
Exactly. And the process isn't just about improving the model's capabilities, it's also about optimizing its efficiency. A 0.5 update might include architectural improvements that allow the model to run faster, use less compute power, or respond more quickly. These are critical for making the models more scalable and cost-effective, which directly impacts how widely they can be deployed and used.
Okay, so it's not always about making it smarter, in the traditional sense, but also making it better behaved and more efficient. That actually makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a lot of what goes on is about controlling and refining these incredibly powerful entities, rather than just constantly pushing the boundaries of raw intelligence.
That's a very good way to put it, Corn. Think of the initial pre-training as giving the model a vast, undirected intelligence. The fine-tuning and alignment processes are about shaping that intelligence, giving it guardrails, and making it a more useful and responsible tool for humanity. It's the difference between a raw genius and a well-educated, ethical scholar.
That analogy works. But it also sounds like a never-ending task. Will we ever reach a point where these models are done and don't need these incremental updates?
I push back on the idea of done in this context. The world is constantly changing, new information is always emerging, and our understanding of human needs and societal values evolves. So, these models will always need to be updated to remain relevant and useful. Moreover, our ability to identify subtle flaws and improve performance also advances over time. It's an ongoing interaction between the model, the data, and human understanding.
All right, we've got a caller on the line, and we've got Jim on the line. Hey Jim, what's on your mind?
Yeah, this is Jim from Ohio. I've been listening to you two go on about this, and I gotta say, you're overcomplicating it. All these .5 updates and fine-tuning and red teaming, in my day, if something worked, you just left it alone. This sounds like a lot of fancy words for fixing something that ain't really broke. My neighbor Gary does the same thing, always tinkering with his perfectly good lawnmower, says he's optimizing the carburetor. Just mow the lawn, Gary. And you guys, just let the AI write its little poems and leave it be. Also, the weather here in Ohio is supposed to turn nasty again this weekend, just when I was planning to finally clean out the garage.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, Jim, but I think Herman's point about the evolving nature of information and societal values is really important. If an AI is going to be useful in the real world, it needs to keep up.
Exactly, Jim. It's not about fixing something that isn't broken. It's about continuously adapting it to new contexts and higher standards. What might have been acceptable in terms of bias or factual accuracy a year ago might not be today. And when these models are interacting with millions, if not billions, of people, even a small improvement in harmlessness can prevent significant issues.
harmlessness, schmarmlessness. It's just a computer, isn't it? My cat Whiskers is more likely to cause harm knocking over my coffee than one of these AI things, and he does that every Tuesday. I just don't see the point of all this constant tweaking. Sounds like busy work to me.
I get your skepticism, Jim, but imagine if your GPS system never updated, or if your phone's operating system never got security patches. It's a similar principle, just on a much grander scale and with more complex implications.
And to your point about just a computer, Jim, the complexity of these systems means that unintended consequences are always a risk. The goal of these incremental updates is often to catch and mitigate those risks before they become widespread problems. It's preventative maintenance, but for an intelligence.
Preventative maintenance? Puff. They should just build them right the first time. Anyway, I gotta go. Whiskers is probably trying to get into the tuna again. You two think about what I said.
Thanks for calling in, Jim. Always good to hear your perspective.
Right, Jim from Ohio, with the grounded, if slightly curmudgeonly, take. But his point about just build them right the first time brings us back to the inherent complexity. These aren't static machines, they're learning systems operating on vast, dynamic data sets. There is no single right way that covers every possible future interaction.
So, what's the big takeaway for our listeners from all this behind-the-scenes magic? How does understanding these 0.5 updates change how we should interact with AI?
I think the main takeaway is to view these AI models not as finished products, but as living, evolving entities. Every interaction, every piece of feedback, every new piece of information in the world contributes to their continuous refinement. For users, it means appreciating that even subtle improvements are the result of immense effort, and that your feedback, even just using the models, is indirectly contributing to their evolution.
And for those who are building with AI, or even just thinking about its future, it really emphasizes the importance of iterative development, continuous evaluation, and the ethical considerations around deployment. It's not enough to build a powerful model. You also have to nurture it, guide it, and constantly ensure its alignment with human values.
Indeed, it's a testament to the fact that artificial intelligence, at its cutting edge, is still very much a human endeavor, driven by massive teams and a relentless pursuit of improvement, even in those small, seemingly insignificant numerical bumps. The OWN5 might be small, but the process is anything but.
What a deep dive into something that most of us just take for granted. Thanks for shedding light on the immense work behind these updates, Herman. And thank you to Daniel for giving us such a thought-provoking prompt this week.
My pleasure, Corn. It's truly a fascinating area where science and engineering meet complex ethical challenges.
Absolutely. That's all the time we have for this episode of My Weird Prompts. You can find us on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. We'll be back next time with another weird prompt to explore. Until then, stay curious. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.